Hello everybody, I hope you are all doing well. I wanted to send out a quick overview of Chapter 7 to just give you a little sneak peek about what you're going to be reading, or if you've already read it, it can serve as an overview for you. Our chapter talks about dialects, and everyone speaks a dialect. When we talk about speaking English, we know that we hear different dialects from across our country. But in the classroom, when we talk about English, we're talking about Standard American English, or SAE, and that's what we use in business, in education. That's what we hear in our media reports. But across our country, we have many different semantic differences that one will hear. For example, I think of Coke, soda, or pop. Just depends on who you're talking to. They will have a different name for their drink. Your book discusses differences such as to go or to stay meals at a restaurant. We here in Florida say for here or to go. We also do talk about takeout food, but that's emphasized a little bit more in other parts of the country. Some interesting differences are here on this slide. I'm sure you recognize some words that you use, and then maybe some that you hear some of your friends from various parts of the United States use. Another example of semantic differences that comes into my mind is the American cookie is the British biscuit. So we definitely have semantic differences within the English language. We also have phonological variations within our language, and I wanted to share a quick video with you. Let's listen to this accent. I would like for you to listen for the deleted R from this gentleman.
So, thank you, Mr. President. I certainly agree with both of my colleagues. And it's not just Cummings Park, it's Car Park, it's Playstead Park, it's throughout the community. I think at this point, too, I'd like to send an official resolve to the DPW to do not only the cleanup at all these parks, but do a preventative maintenance plan on the top lots as well. They're starting with the nice weather. It's starting to get crowded down there, and I checked with the DPW Parks Department, and they'll only more or less respond to complaints of items that may happen. Maybe missing a piece of equipment or something of that nature. I think in the interest of public safety for the children and the families of our community, we should have them in on a Saturday maybe and go through every park in the community and just check them all for safety, as well as start doing the cleanups with the graffiti removal, as well as I know they're getting the baseball fields ready for the upcoming season, but these tot lots are certainly a priority. I know Barry Park has some issues with the tot lot that has to be addressed that was brought to their attention, but a citywide systematic approach, and let's be proactive so that someone doesn't get injured at one of our parks. Very good.
You will also hear differences in the pronunciation of I. I have a friend who's in town now for our doctoral intensives. Her name is Camille, and she has a wonderful accent. Camille lived in the Bronx most of her childhood and growing up years, and I'm hoping at some point in the next 2 weeks during intensives to record her talking so that I can share it with you. In your chapter, you're going to read about British American dialects, and I've just pulled some words such as a nappy. Nappies are diapers. The bonnet of a car, which is the hood. Pram. You might have heard that, or think about a movie that you've seen with British characters. A pram is a baby stroller. The boot of a car, it's the trunk. And chips are, of course, fries. We run into that sometimes in our American restaurants. You're also going to be reading about African American vernacular English, and some of the characteristics are listed here on this screenshot. On page 203, it talks about the use of a double negative. I don't have no dogs. And you're going to run into that with a lot of your students as you deal with double negatives in English class and as you're just working with them on their writing. Also, the Hispanic English has double negation as well. In standard American English, we would say, I don't have any help. But the Hispanic English student might think it's totally correct to say, I don't have no help. Again, using a double negative. Your textbook refers to some different folk tales that you can pull up. I've accessed a website here. Let's take just a quick peek at one. This is the website. Let's try Three Little Pigs.
Now, one was hard working, but them other two boys was mighty lazy.
That was Aunt Pearly Sue. She was a little hard to hear. Let's try another one.
Way down in the deepest south, along the river they now call it Mississippi, there once lived an assembly of animals who were all the best of friends. Now this was a good long time ago, so long ago that most folks forget. But some still remember how the animals in Bird Village got along just as kindly as any other critter could. They helped each other out of fixes and fixed each other out of hard times. Things were peaceable and pleasant, generally speaking, that is.
Okay, that was narrated by Danny Glover, and it was the story, the beginning of the story of how Brer Rabbit outsmarts the baddest fella in the forest, the mean old boss lion. And this is a Southern folk tale, and there's some blues playing in the background, and this actually was a 1993 Grammy nominee. Also in this chapter, you're going to be reading about Pidgin languages. Those are simplified languages. They've been developed for specific interactions, and usually the people had no common language, and they would come into contact in some type of a business. Maybe they were trading, and a Pidgin language would develop. And when that Pidgin language would be passed on to the next generation, and it would actually become the language in a community, we would call it a Creole language. When I think of Creole, I think of one of my former students, Frankie, and I had him in the inner city of Tampa, and Frankie came to me from Haiti, and he did not speak a word of English. Well, I had another Haitian student in my classroom. Her name was Julia. And I said, Julia, maybe you could help me talk to Frankie, and we can get him started with some English. And she would try a little bit, and she said, I can't talk to him. He speaks Creole. I can't understand everything. But when I really needed her to, she could get the point across to Frankie. And sometimes if I have you in a face-to-face, I'll tell you some stories about teaching English with Frankie, and some of the funny things that happened having a student in your class that knew absolutely no English. In this chapter, you also explore people code switching between their styles of speech or their registers. It depends on the situation, which type of language you're going to use and how formal you're going to be. You have one level of formality for your family, another when you're talking to the clerk in the grocery store. Your voice probably changes when you speak to children that you see in your internships. You have a professional level of voice, and there's also a certain way that you talk when you speak to elders. And so you'll read about some of those in Chapter 7. Looking at those, let's talk about informal language. Just one thing that I wanted to point out about this, we use contractions every day. We even teach our students about contractions and how to put the apostrophe. But when we come to college, contractions are no longer acceptable in our formal writing. When you're writing an APA formatted paper for a professor, whether it's research or a case study, remember to do a special search and take out any contractions that you might have put in there. They like to slip in because we use them in our everyday language, but we should take them out of our formal writing. Also, when we're just talking, we might say, "Where are you going to be at? Where are you going to be at?" And just asking a question. But when we are writing, we want to be careful not to end our sentences with a preposition. So just wanted to point that out. I know that's an old rule. Know that you've heard it before, but sometimes I still see it in our college students' writing. Denotation and connotation is a lesson that you'll teach to your students. And I always tell my students that denotation is the dictionary meaning because it starts with a D, but the connotation is an implied meaning. When we say you are a dog, it doesn't really mean that you crawl around on all four legs and bark. The connotation might mean that, wow, you're just not very pleasant to look at. Another thing you'll read in the chapter, well, let's do one more example of connotations. I'd forgotten I put this one in there. When you're looking, at somebody say, "Oh, the little one," and that has a positive connotation. A child could be neutral either way, but if you call somebody a brat, that's just a negative connotation. So you want to be prepared to teach that to your children. One way to do it is to focus on their writing about using more specific words. And if you're talking about a princess, she might perspire, but if it's someone out working on the farm, they're going to sweat. So here are just some examples. I'm not going to belabor on that point too long. In formal language, we also teach our students to avoid jargon. Jargons are words used maybe in a certain profession. I know my father-in-law once talked about a school bus, and it couldn't go any faster than the governor would allow. And I was sitting there wondering, and finally I opened my mouth and said, "How can the governor know how fast all the school buses across the state of Florida are going?" And my father-in-law and all the other relatives that were sitting there had a really good laugh, because a governor is actually a mechanical word. It's a part on the school bus that is set to not allow the school bus to go above a particular speed. So I didn't understand the mechanical jargon. A lot of times we as English teachers use words like coordinating conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs. But I just suggest here that you embed your lesson in context. And when you're discussing difficult terms, such as coordinating conjunctions, think of a way to do it that really brings in a lot of context. I will share with you sometime if I have you in a face-to-face. I call these t-shirt words. And I tell a little story about, my husband always wanting to be sure his shirt matches his dress pants. Subordinating conjunctions, I have a submarine page, and we talk about subordinating conjunctions, and we list all our subordinating conjunctions on that page, and etc. Just thinking of a special way to remember some of these terms. Another common term that you will be exposed to in this chapter and you'll be teaching to your students would be the vocabulary term a euphemism. And we use euphemisms to make something seem less offensive or, not quite so unpleasant. For example, we here in the cartoon, instead of saying a mutt, we say a hybrid. Or instead of this gentleman, saying that he was fired, he says, "I'm going to be spending more time with the family." Someone died, we might say that they passed away or expired. Those are just euphemisms. This one, certified pre-owned. That's just a nice way to say used. Genuine imitation leather means something's made out of vinyl. So just a couple of words I wanted you to pay particular attention to as you work your way through the chapter. I'm trying to stick to my 15-minute limit. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up, but I hope you enjoy Chapter 7. I hope you get some great takeaways for your future classrooms. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thanks for listening.